I love these live recordings because they're always so interesting. Okay, so perfect. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Visual Social Media Podcast. I'm your host, Vincent Ng of MCNG Marketing. And guess what? I am joined by two awesome friends who I met at Social Media Marketing World last year and who also happen to be introverts. Even though we may not look like it, we are. So I'm excited to introduce Ian Anderson Gray from Seriously Social, who is the social media tools guy, and Elisa Meredith, owner of elisameredith.com and co-owner of Scalable Social Media. We're going to be talking about how introverts can survive at social media conferences. That's the main topic. So let's start off with ladies first. Elisa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I am a Pinterest fanatic and a content marketer. Excuse me, I am an introvert, as you mentioned, but I do enjoy presenting and teaching. So I do enjoy consulting on Pinterest and other inbound marketing. I think my thrill is when I get to plan a strategy for someone and see it come about. Excuse me, especially when it involves Pinterest.
It's okay to giggle. That's fine. Giggling is allowed on podcasts and live shows. So Ian, my man, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, other than being a very charismatic gentleman, which we established earlier before the show.
I'm charismatic, am I? That's good. Well, yeah, I actually trained as a musician, as a professional singer, but I've always been interested in technology, a bit of a geek. I set up a web agency about 10 years ago. So my background, I suppose, is building websites. I'm a web developer. But I also run a blog called Seriously Social, where I blog about social media tools and get a bit geeky about that. But I try and do that in a really accessible way, in a way that will hopefully make sense to most people. I am an introvert, but I suppose I've only kind of come to terms with that relatively recently. I thought it was, I thought being an introvert was almost like having a disease. So I didn't want to admit it. And so actually, part of going to social media marketing world this year was because part of that, healing process of coming to terms with being an introvert, and it was really cool to meet you guys there.
Yeah, actually, I'm not gonna lie. You make it. You're making this sound like a medical podcast. But anyways, I want to give a shout out to Kim from Educator Spin. Thank you for waving hi at us, and same with Paolo. Really appreciate you being on the show. So yeah, let's really talk about introversion. First off, let's go and talk about how do you both define introvert? We'll start off with Ian this time.
Yeah, I always thought that being an introvert was to do with maybe you're shy and maybe you're not very good at going on, presenting on stage or performing or anything like that. But it isn't. It's about where do you get your energy from. And I love being around people. I need people. I need to bounce ideas off people. That's how I develop my ideas, my business. But I get to a point when I need to recharge my batteries, I suppose I would say, and I need to escape. And I get my best work done working on my own. And that's really where I get my energy from. So if I go to a party or if I go to a conference, I get to a point, I'm absolutely great, but I get to a point when enough's enough and I have to retreat and I have to recharge my batteries. So I'm not maybe what some people would say is a classic introvert in maybe the sense that people think of it. I'm happy going on stage. Well, I am when I get there. There's always that kind of I do feel nervous, but when I get on there, something kind of clicks in place and I'm absolutely fine. So it's not to do with that. It's to do with where you get your energy from.
Hey, perfect. How about Elisa? How do you define introvert?
Well, I completely agree with everything Ian Anderson Gray said, because not just because of the accent, because it's completely true. I can turn on the social Elisa, but it drains my battery so fast that I really need to just sit back and be by myself for a while. But I think it also comes a little bit down to some social anxiety. So if there are ways that I can kind of mitigate that, then I can perform, I can survive, and even enjoy the experience. But I think it might take a little more planning for an introvert to enjoy that kind of interaction.
And I agree. I agree with both of you. I think that for me, the definition of an introvert is somebody that needs to recharge after a lot of social activity, which leads us into the next question. I know Ian had touched a little bit on this. Same with you, Elisa. But so what isn't an introvert? Because a lot of people think introversion is shyness, but that's not what it's not. So what is it not in this case, you think, Elisa?
It's not a person who always has to be surrounded by other people. So whereas I am perfectly happy if my Sunday evening involves Doctor Who or Downton Abbey and my dogs on the couch, okay, maybe that makes me a geek as well, but that's really what I need to get ready for the next week. And I think of an extrovert as someone who, if they're not doing and interacting with other people, then they feel like they're missing out or like something's just not right.
How about yourself, Ian? What do you think? What is not an introvert?
Yeah, it's a sliding scale. So I think it's not necessarily somebody who is shy. I think you can be shy and an introvert, but it's also. It's not somebody who necessarily kind of retreats from people all the time. I love, as I said, I love being around people. I need people. So I think I think we need to get away from the stereotype of a shy person who can't get on stage and speak to people on that level. I actually find it easier speaking to a large group of people than I will say at a party where there's like, I don't know, 30, 40 people that I don't know. I'd rather get on stage and talk to like 200 people, just one to lots of people than having to kind of, I don't know, say, for example, a situation where you're told to speak to the person next to you and you don't know who they are. And then you have to kind of, I don't know, it's the small talk bit. I mean, we haven't talked about small talk, but that's one other thing that introverts don't particularly like. I've learned how to do that. I'm actually okay at small talk. I'm quite good at asking people what the weather, how's the weather doing and blah, 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 but I'd rather not. And I know we maybe talk about social media marketing world, but that was one of the things that I put in place. I wanted to get the small talk out of the way before I went to the conference so that I could just get deep into, get into the proper conversations as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that it's interesting because I share the same sentiment as you, Ian, in the sense that it's interesting because when I grew up, I had no problem with public speaking. Started back in grade 8. If you asked me to perform in front of 60, 100 people, it's not a problem. But you're right. When I'm at social media conferences and I have to sit down and I think we've all been there where it's like, okay, introduce yourself to the person to the right and to the left and talk a little bit about yourself. I feel like there's a little bit of social anxiety that kind of comes through. So small chat is a bit of a challenge, I think, for a lot of introverts when they go to social media conferences or any conference in general. So Lisa, what other challenges maybe that you feel or that you've had happen to you or you think introverts face when they go to social media conferences?
Okay, well, for example, I think the hardest time I had at Social Media Marketing World was getting there in the morning and getting breakfast. I mean, it sounds like such a simple thing, right? But you just kind of go right back to high school and wondering, where am I going to sit in the cafeteria or on the school bus? And is anyone going to let me sit next to them? It's just that silly anxiety that really would make me even want to skip breakfast. So I think that was my biggest challenge, was when there is no structure and no one in particular that I need to speak with, trying, like Ian said, small talk. I don't enjoy it. I feel like it's, I know this sounds kind of rude, but it feels like a waste of time. So I would rather get right down to it. And I know Ian was great with that. I mean, I felt like we had some really deep conversations and we really connected. It was like, oh, finally, we can talk about something real. So I think that's a big challenge. I think it's a skill that introverts need to learn, and just get that out of the way so we can get to the good stuff, like Ian said.
And I think that's the interesting thing about introverts. Again, like Ian was mentioning, it's important not to generalize introverts as this one category. But what I find myself is that when I meet another introvert, I'll actually ask people, "Are you an introvert or extrovert?" when I go networking or at social media conferences. And immediately when they kind of say I'm an introvert, then I quit the small talk actually, and I go into the good stuff. And I know it sounds weird, but it's actually, but I find it works very effective because you don't need to talk about the small things anymore. But I do find it's a very, for example, like you're mentioning earlier, Lisa, and Ian, you can share your experiences as well. But breakfast can be a bit of a nerve-wracking time, or lunchtime is a very nerve-wracking time because again, people tend to be in large groups, and you're trying to, I don't want to use the word infiltrate, but you are trying to get into the group. But at the same time, you don't, like for me, I'm always afraid that I don't want to be perceived as being rude, or that I'm not interested in the conversation. That's always one of my biggest fears. But how about you, Ian? Do you feel like there are certain challenges when you go to social media conferences? Does breakfast frighten you? Well, not breakfast, but you know what I'm getting at.
I love breakfast, but I'm talking about the food. I think all the things we've been talking about, I've been to conferences in the past where I've really hated the bits, the eating moments, because there's loads of people talking already and I'm there with my plate. I mean, I kind of was at a conference recently and I was kind of like, okay, they're talking with people. Okay, I'll go to this room with my plate. Okay, they're talking. Oh, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to stand here. Maybe someone will talk to me. Oh, no one's talking to me. Oh dear. So, I think I don't know whether this is an introvert thing or whether, I don't know, extroverts struggle with this, but I think we probably overanalyze things. And actually, I could probably just talk to somebody, just go up to somebody and just start a conversation. It would be absolutely fine. But yeah, that's in order to kind of, because I'd been to conferences in the past and I had a bad experience, I wanted to, because I was spending so much money and going so far away to San Diego from the UK is obviously a long distance for me. I wanted to make the most of it. So I made a big list of all the people that I wanted to meet. And I tried to connect with them beforehand. I arranged Skype calls. And I mean, probably some people listening to this, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Why would I go to so much bother? But it really, really worked. So there's quite a few people that I connected with that I could then go to the conference, and we had loads in common. There's no problem with talking. At breakfast, I made a beeline for them. They probably thought, oh dear, here's this dodgy British guy, but I went in and started talking, and it was great, and it made such a difference. And the other thing that's kind of, maybe we'll talk about, but interestingly, at social media marketing world, almost everyone I spoke to admitted that they were an introvert. And maybe this is no surprise, because we're all, I don't know, social media, we all like hiding behind our computers and not really speaking with people. But yeah, it's so funny. I think a lot of us are introverts and we're deep thinkers, and actually we kind of connected really well because we understood each other at the conference.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know how you felt, Elisa, but for example, what was really interesting was when Ian, Elisa, myself, and another friend of ours, Doreen, I think was it just the four of us, I think, at lunch? We had a lively conversation. It was energetic, and I think that I really enjoy that. I like sometimes that people understand that we're in our heads, and that, we have a lot to say, but sometimes we just don't have the right people to say it to. Which is nice to be around introverts that way. By the way, Kim Vidge from Educator Spin, she is offering a great tip. Kim, if you want to jump on to tell about your tip live in front of the audience, that'd be fantastic. If not, I'm happy to share that. But I mean, moving on kind of to the next topic, because I think Ian talked a little bit about kind of tips for networking at these types of social media conferences. Like Ian was saying, it might be good just to contact these people ahead of time. Lisa, do you have any tips for the audience about how to network at these social media conferences as an introvert?
Well, I think Social Media Examiner did a fantastic job at their conference by building networking in to the event. And maybe you're going to go on that direction a little bit, but if that's not set up for you, so I went to HubSpot's Inbound last year, and it was close to 10,000 people, which for an introvert is kind of horrifying. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of how I felt. So if there is no structure provided, and there really wasn't at HubSpot, other than like an area where you could mingle with the booth presenters, I would make a structure for yourself. So with what Social Media Examiner did, they kind of gamified networking in a way with their bingo card on the ship. So I would actually write down some things to talk about with total strangers, and just do it, because I know Ian said he had a bad experience. I don't know what happened. I think we all kind of were like, uh-oh, it could really be bad. Because honestly, 99% of the time, if you go up and talk to somebody, they're probably looking for someone to talk to as well. So just do it. Just take that first step and see what happens. And no one's going to turn their back on you. Right, Ian?
Yeah, definitely. Though the bad experience wasn't Social Media Marketing World. It was years ago at another conference. So,
bad people. No, there's never bad people at Social Media Marketing World. But the truth is, I mean, Social Media Marketing World is a great place, and a tip that Kim Vidge was talking about earlier, and this applies to breakfast or any type of networking, is pick an online friend beforehand to meet you in the morning. And it, that way it takes the stress off of you in the morning. So again, especially I think for introverts, we have a tendency to want to be in smaller groups. We like the one-on-one interaction, and I think that it makes us feel more comfortable. And that's something that a tip that I like to offer is, don't feel like you have to try to meet everybody, because it is a conference, like Inbound's conference of 10,000, and there's 3,000, and I guarantee there's probably a list of 50 people that you want to meet. But the reality is, I think trying to meet 50 people in a weekend or in 2 days is just nuts. So if you only get to meet 4 or 5 people that you really want to meet, and that's what you do, I think that's great. How about yourself, Ian? What kind of tips can you offer for the audience in terms of networking as introverts?
Well, I mentioned obviously connecting beforehand. I think the other thing is, be kind to yourself. You are not superhuman, so just make sure you don't beat yourself up. If you need to retreat, if you need to kind of cut down your 50 people you want to meet down to 5 or 10, that's absolutely fine. The other thing is, I think just words such as networking, the use of the word networking can be scary. So there was this thing, it kind of freaked me out, this thing at Social Media Marketing World. It was like, what was it? Power networking walking or something? Power walking net.
Oh, yes.
Morning power walk or something. Is that it? I see those so often. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was with networking. So I wasn't sure whether it was power walking or power networking while walking. But just the idea of that, But so I think instead of using the word networking, which can sound scary, just change it in your head to having a conversation with somebody. Because ultimately for me, the reason I went to Social Media Marketing was to build relationships with. It was absolutely awesome to meet you guys. And that was the main reason I went there. So it's about talking, conversing with people. If you talk about your business, great. If you don't, that's fine. Just be yourself, because I think we're pretty bad at being other people.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. Because
you want to comment on
be kind to yourself.
What Ian said, Lisa?
There are a lot of people who go to the conferences and they just network. They never go to any sessions, but that's probably a little too much for introverts. So I would definitely say, if you need to take some time away, just do it. We were joking earlier about hiding in the bathroom, but I think it can be just as effective to go to a session and take notes and spend that time in your head, so that when it's over, you can start over again and network. And then I know I stayed off-site at a little Airbnb place, which was really relaxing. And just for me, that physically getting away from the crowd really helps me to rest and relax and be just ready to go talk to people.
No, I agree. I think that that's something, you know, that I go through too, is that we need resting relaxation time. And which kind of leads us into the next question, which is, what do you find challenging as an introvert at a social media conference? And for me, I'll start off this a little bit. I think in the past, I had this idea that you had to be at every, like Ian was saying, it's networking, right? So you're trying to meet everybody, but you had to be at every networking event. You had to be at every party. You had to be at every brunch or lunch or whatever it is. You had to always be there. I felt like I'd be missing out if I didn't. But like you're saying earlier, be kind to yourself. If you're not in the mood to go and mingle at the after party because you're exhausted, then don't. I think it's okay. But like Ian's saying, I almost felt like it was a disease, wanting to have time by myself. I felt a little guilty about that. So how about you, Ian? What challenges? I know we've covered a lot about this, but are there any other challenges you find as an introvert when you're going to social media conferences?
Well, this is not just social media conferences, but there is, if there's more than one track at the same time, and obviously there is at Social Media Marketing World, I don't know how many, there's 8 or 10 or something, you're always going to have this fear of missing out. So I would say, before you go, look at what's going on and choose to go to, I don't know, 60%. And that's what I did. I didn't go to every single talk. I spoke to people in the corridors, and it wasn't that I didn't want to learn everything. I did. But particularly at Social Media Marketing World, we had the virtual ticket, so I could always listen to those later on. So I probably went to around 50% of the talks, and the rest of the time I just spent talking with people in the corridors, going for a walk. So again, it's going back to the whole be kind to yourself thing.
And you, Lisa, do you find any other challenges you haven't mentioned, kind of being an introvert at conferences or social media conferences?
Pretty much any social situation, but when you have to travel such a long way, I think even just traveling is a challenge for introverts. So I gave myself a little time before the conference started to recharge from that, which, I mean, I feel so high maintenance sometimes, but that's the joy of not being 20 anymore. You know your limitations, and what you need to do to be your best self. So I try to give myself permission to take that extra time, because I know I'm going to need it if I want to enjoy.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that's we're going to go into that with our next question as well, which is, how do you recharge when you're at these conferences? I know we talked a little bit about walking, taking time for yourself, but are there anything specific things that you both like to do to recharge? So we'll start off.
That's an interesting question.
Ian this time.
I went for coffees with people, so just one-on-ones. Like our little. What was it? A Mexican we went for? That was a small group of people. That was great. I mean, that was our little introvert thing. It was completely unplanned. So I love sleeping. So, and I needed a lot of sleep after that horrible flight. So I did, I just kind of went back to the hotel room and had an afternoon sleep or afternoon nap. There wasn't an awful lot of time for that, to be honest. So I knew that in my head that I just needed to go, have a few breaks, a few one-to-one small chats with people. But I knew that it was coming to the end in like 2 or 3 times. It was only 3 days or whatever. So at the end of it, I could just crash. And I did. And that's fine. I knew it was going to happen. So it was for long.
We're just getting a little bit of a poor signal. So let's switch over to.
We got robot Ian.
Poor Ian, no, poor Ian. Ian, if you can hear us, just to let you know, it is a little bit of poor signal, so hopefully we'll be able to switch around back to you. But Elisa, let's move on to. Sorry, let me just get that up 1 second. So Elisa, I think for you, what do you do to
I like to get a little
specifically
exercise.
recharge
So
your batteries when
one
you're
morning I went
at a
for
conference?
a run and then discovered that San Diego is nothing but hills. So, but still, it was great to get outside. And I did walk all over the city. I walked to Old Town. I walked to the zoo by myself, which maybe for an extrovert sounds lonely, but for me it was great, you know. And I talked to the people at Starbucks and some people at the zoo, and so I got a little bit of interaction, but I could still have my alone time. And something else I wanted to mention is that I think for me, a lot of it comes from anxiety. So when I'm preparing for a conference, I mean, literally, I have started planning what I'm going to wear next year to the conference already, because that's something that causes me anxiety. So when I get there, I do not want to have to think about what I'm wearing, what day, just anything you can do to plan ahead so that whatever causes you any anxiety, you can have that all out of the way and just ready to go and not have to think about it.
No, I agree. I think that's great advice. Is if there's any way to reduce the anxiety that you're going through, or just to kind of plan things, it's always a major help. And another thing that, for example, that in terms of recharging, Kim Vidge says that finding moments for rest, or sorry, not rest, but finding moments for a reset button in the schedule to hear your thoughts are really key. And I think that is an important thing for introverts, is to kind of settle down, because we're getting a lot of stimulation, to kind of reflect on what's happening through the day. And so we've got Ian joining back, because Ian's not telling us this, but really he's trying to respond to what do you guys call what's your secret service? MI something? I can't remember what is in the UK. There you go. So I'm sure what he's not telling us, he works for MI6. That's why there was a disruption. So Ian, I think where we last started off a little bit, is that just kind of talking about the challenges, and
I can't
kind of
remember what I was saying.
Do you want to finish off what you were talking about earlier?
Because I turned into a robot, didn't I?
You did.
So,
you did.
Where did we get to? In terms of the challenges, yeah, I think it was just knowing your own. Just knowing where you can cope with, because we're all different, and I think there are different levels of is ambivalent, and
okay, I think we're going through. Oh. Unfortunately, we're just going through some of the same technical difficulties. No fault of Ian's, of course. It's just the MI6 is looking for him all the time. But yeah, I think that it's really important just to know. I think no matter what challenges there are, it's just take some time to reflect on what some of the answers are. Be kind to yourself. I think that's really important. So in the middle of this interview, I want to do a bit of a pinch mission and give a shout out to Tailwind. Tailwind is the premier Pinterest scheduling app. Again, if you're looking for an official Pinterest partner and you're looking to schedule 100 pins a month, make sure you go check out Tailwind. So tailwindapp.com. So let's get back to our conversation. And again, if anybody has any questions about introversion, or you want to jump into the question into the conversation, Paolo, you're welcome to jump in. Kim, I know you're busy with the kids because you're super mom. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not just educator spin, it's like super mom spin. So feel free to jump into the open seat. But I think one of the things that I think here's the interesting thing. I think a lot of people, hey, there we go. Paula's jumping in. Yay.
Yeah,
I love it when people jump in.
Too.
It's awesome.
Hi, everybody.
Greetings.
Hey, good to see you. Good.
Hey, how's it going?
Well,
Paolo,
I'm a social customer service consultant here in Italy. And I met, indeed, Ian last month at the New Media Europe conference in Manchester, UK, because we both were speakers at that event. So as I saw, the blab, I was really interested to listen to and watch Ian and also you all guys, because this is a very interesting topic. I used to be, and I'm still very shy, but a few years ago, I decided that I did not want to be pushed back. So I said to myself, okay, let's do some mistakes. Let's, sometimes take some risks. But at the same time, I want to take any chance, any opportunity that I may have to get exposed wherever I need. It may be interesting for any kind of business or personal relationships. But it's still hard.
Yeah, so you felt like introversion kind of held you back a little bit?
Yes, yeah, it's still very hard. Every time I attend, big events or networking events where I do not know almost anybody, I really sweat. So I need just to break the ice at the very first minute of the breakfast, Lisa. So if I just wait a couple of minutes or 5 minutes, I would just stand still and say nothing. So I just fight against myself. I force myself. And I say, okay, let's break the ice with the first person that I see, and I watch his eyes or her eyes. I say, hi, everybody, and just smile. I start with a smile and say hello. And that goes on. And it works. It works even, also when I need to speak. I 3 speeches in the last month. And this the very beginning, and then I'd like also to listen to your opinions about this topic. The very first minute is essential to, to take the control of your speech and of your emotions, and that's crucial.
No, I agree, Paolo. I think that going back to what you're saying earlier, I think everything does start with a little bit of a smile. And it's interesting because I think, like you're saying, you start with a smile, and maybe I find that the first minute is tough. Usually if you let it warm up a little bit, you give it 2-3 minutes, things become a little bit easier. I find like I used to have a rule for conversation. I used to call it the 3-minute mark. And that is that if you can survive the conversation in 3 minutes, then usually you can go somewhere with it. And generally, if within 3 minutes, if it's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to go anywhere. That's just the way it is, right? But something you also mentioned as being a speaker, and since all of us have done presentations, we've been speakers at either a conference or will be speakers at Social Media Success Summit. Shout out to Elisa. But as speakers, I think this is kind of the interesting thing. As speakers, what do you find challenging about being an introvert? And I'll start off with that myself because maybe it's not a very clear question, but I have to admit, I find it's very challenging because when I tell people about an introvert, somehow they have this image that I'm not a very, lively person on stage. But I think the part of the problem of being a speaker is that I'm very lively on stage, but I tell you, I will, like after my presentation, after I've answered all these questions one-on-one, I will just retreat right away. Like I will, and I hate to say it's nothing personal. I don't want to see anybody. And it's really hard for me. So Ian, tell us, what's your experience as a professional speaker and being an introvert? Do you retreat from your speaking right away?
It's not always
what
possible to do that.
What do you do?
But I do try. I mean, I usually will try and go away for half an hour, and then come back in, because that's, you want to be with the rest of the guys at the conference. So yeah, I do retreat. I have like just half an hour by myself, have a drink, and then we'll get back in. And it's still remembering that the conference will be over soon and you can relax and all will be wonderful. So yeah. Do I still sound like a robot?
Yeah. I don't. But sound like you're saying, it's quite interesting. No, you don't. No, it's not a robot. We're right, just right. It's I DJ'd all that people. Okay. All that previous stuff is, it's all been DJ'd. Yeah. But like you were saying earlier, Ian, which I agree, and Paolo, maybe you can elaborate if this has been your experience, but definitely after conferences, even, whether a speaker or attending, after the conference is over, I am zonked. Like I'm tired, and I will need like at least a full day to recover. So for you, Paolo, as a speaker and as attendee, what's your experience like
after you're done doing speaking? I feel very, very tired, but at the same time, I feel very, very relaxed. really, experienced the same feeling 2 years ago. Sorry, 2020 in Manchester. In Manchester was I was a bit.
I think it's.
Oh. Yeah, and it's interesting. Oh, sorry, Elisa. Go ahead. You first. Ladies always first on this podcast.
I think it's funny too when people who I know listen to my podcast and they say, I can't believe that's you. You sound so confident and so sure of yourself. I would never believe that you were an introvert. And, you know, that's great to hear because that's what I want it to sound like. But I think the difference is that I have some structure and I'm prepared and I know what I'm going to say. And I'm going to talk about something that I care about with someone that I care about. So I think that's the difference when you're going into a conference. You are completely, there's a lot of mystery. So what you and Ian were saying about making connections beforehand, so you have certain people you want to get to know, can relieve some of that anxiety. But I think that as an introvert, I really don't think presenting is that much harder for introverts and extroverts, because I know everybody gets nervous speaking publicly. And with introverts, I think we really shine when we're prepared and we're excited about what we're going to talk about. So I almost think it's an advantage, especially when you really surprise people.
No, and I agree. I think that's always the interesting thing is that, and I think that always makes it, as ironic as it is, it makes for good conversation when you can surprise people. It's like you're on stage and you're doing what you need to do to jazz up the audience, and then you tell them you're an introvert, and then it's almost like that's impossible. Don't you lie to me? Don't you lie? You know, it's like that kind of feeling. But going back to what Paolo had said earlier, and then Ian and I had this conversation with Melanie, which was Melanie Dodaro, who is the author of the LinkedIn Code. And she said, actually, when she started presenting, it was a huge drain on her. Like she would have the same problems, like she'd have to rest up for the rest of the day. But as time went on, she said that it found it much easier. You know, you present, it's like a muscle, you get used to it. So even if you do find it exhausting, it seems like it gets easier, which is nice to know. And so like Educator Spin, Kim Vidge was saying, you put on your speaker hat and you go forth to conquer and then head back to your introvert zone. Introverts wear different hats at different times. Don't you think? Yeah, I agree. We wear different hats. We're in our heads. And I think that we adjust to whatever the situation is. I think that's just the way it is. We're going to have to wrap up the show, but before we wrap up, we've got some really great goodies sponsored by Elisa Meredith. Ticket to the Visual Social Media Conference, which Ian Anderson Gray is a speaker, as well as Kim Vidge from Educator Spin. So